The stale air of the courtroom tasted like old paper and unspoken anxieties. It was a thick, cloying taste that settled at the back of my throat, making it hard to swallow. I'd been sitting on the hard wooden bench for what felt like an eternity, my hands clenched so tightly in my lap that my knuckles ached. The low hum of fluorescent lights overhead was a constant, irritating buzz, a sound that seemed to magnify the pounding in my ears. To my left, my lawyer, Miss Davies, would occasionally pat my hand, a gesture meant to be comforting. But it only served to remind me of how much I was trembling. My world has been a tapestry woven from sounds, smells, and textures ever since the darkness fell upon my eyes when I was a little girl. I've learned to navigate life with a different kind of sight, a sight that relies on the whispers of the wind, the warmth of the sun on my skin, and the familiar scent of home. And for the past 3 years, my world has had a brave, steady, and furry protector, Leo, my golden retriever guide dog. But Leo wasn't with me now. They had told me he couldn't be in the courtroom while I was testifying. They said it might be a distraction. A distraction. The word felt like a punch to the gut. Leo was my eyes, my confidence, my other half. Without him, I felt like I was navigating a storm-tossed sea in a rudderless boat. The man on trial, Mr. Henderson, was my neighbor. He had always been so kind, at least on the surface. He would bring me my mail, his voice a smooth, calming baritone. "Just making sure you're all right, Clara," he'd say, his hand lingering a moment too long on my arm. I had trusted him. I had let him into my home, into my life. And he had repaid that trust by stealing the one thing I had left of my grandmother, a small, intricately carved wooden music box that played Claire de Lune, the song she used to hum to me as a child. I had known it was him. I had been home that day, listening to an audiobook in my bedroom. I heard him let himself in with the spare key I'd foolishly given him for emergencies. I heard the faint creak of the floorboards in the living room, a sound as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. And then I heard the delicate, almost imperceptible click of the music box being lifted from the mantelpiece. I had called out his name, my voice shaking. "Mr. Henderson? Is that you?" There was a long, heavy silence. And then the sound of the front door closing softly. When I had reported it, the police were skeptical. "You didn't see him, Miss Gable?" the officer had asked, his tone laced with a pity that felt more like condescension. "You only heard a few creaks." I had tried to explain that my hearing was my sight, that I knew the sounds of my own home intimately. But they hadn't truly understood. Now, in this cold, cavernous room, Mr. Henderson's lawyer was using my blindness as a weapon against me. He was a man with a voice like gravel, and every word he spoke seemed to chip away at my composure. "Miss Gable," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space, "you claim you heard my client in your apartment, but you couldn't see him, could you?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "No," I whispered. "I couldn't see him. So, it could have been anyone, couldn't it? A delivery person? A maintenance worker? You have no way of knowing for sure." "I know his footsteps," I insisted, my voice gaining a little strength. "I know the sound of his breathing. It was him." He let out a short, incredulous laugh, a sound that made my skin crawl. "The sound of his breathing. Miss Gable, with all due respect, that is hardly credible evidence." He continued his relentless questioning, twisting my words, making me sound confused and unreliable. He painted a picture of me as a lonely, imaginative blind woman who had concocted a story. With every question, the walls of the courtroom seemed to close in on me. The hum of the lights grew louder, the air thicker. I could feel the eyes of the jury on me, a weight I couldn't see but could feel with every fiber of my being. I imagined them looking at me with the same pity and disbelief as the police officer. My heart was a frantic bird, beating against my ribs. I tried to focus on the feel of the smooth wood of the witness stand beneath my fingertips, to ground myself, but the gravelly voice of Mr. Henderson's lawyer kept pulling me back under. "Isn't it true, Miss Gable?" he boomed. that you were recently denied an extension on your disability benefits, that you were in desperate need of money? The accusation hung in the air, ugly and venomous. It was true that I struggled financially, but the insinuation that I would invent such a story for money was a blow that struck me with physical force. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot and stinging. I had been holding them back for so long, but now the dam was breaking. A sob escaped my lips, a raw, wounded sound that I couldn't stifle. "No," I cried. The word choked and barely audible. "That's not true." The lawyer pressed on, his voice relentless. "Isn't it possible that you misplaced the music box and are now trying to blame an innocent man to solve your financial problems? That was it?" The final thread of my composure snapped. The world, already a blur of darkness, dissolved into a swirling vortex of sound and despair. The lawyer's voice, the buzzing lights, the rustling of papers, it all merged into a cacophony of noise that crashed over me in waves. My carefully constructed walls of strength crumbled, and I buried my face in my hands, my body shaking with uncontrollable sobs. I felt a profound, aching loneliness, a sense of utter helplessness. I was a blind girl, lost in a world that refused to see me, to hear me, to believe me. I heard the judge's voice, a distant, muffled sound. "We will take a short recess." Ms. Davies was by my side in an instant, her arm around my shoulders. "Clara, it's okay," she murmured, her voice a soft anchor in the storm. "We'll get through this." But I couldn't stop crying. The tears were a release of all the frustration, the fear, and the injustice I had been bottling up for weeks. "They don't believe me," I wept into her shoulder. "No one believes me." "I believe you, Clara," she said fiercely, "and that's what matters." She paused for a moment, and I could feel her thinking. Then, she said, "I have an idea. It's a long shot, but it might be our only one." I lifted my tear-streaked face. "What is it?" "It's Leo," she said. "I'm going to ask the judge to let him in." A flicker of hope ignited within me. A tiny spark in the vast darkness. Leo. The thought of his warm, solid presence, the feel of his soft fur beneath my hand, was like a lifeline. But then, the doubt crept back in. "They won't let him," I whispered. "They said he's a distraction." "Let me handle it," Miss Davies said. Her voice filled with a newfound determination. She walked back to the judge's bench, and I could hear the low murmur of their voices. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the conviction in my lawyer's tone. I held my breath, my hands clasped together in a silent prayer. After what felt like an eternity, the judge's voice boomed through the courtroom again. "In light of the witness's distress, and given the unique circumstances of this case, I will allow the guide dog to enter the courtroom. But I am warning you, counsel, this is highly unorthodox." A wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it almost buckled my knees. Miss Davies came back to me, a triumphant smile in her voice. "He's coming, Clara." A few minutes later, I heard the sound that was more beautiful to me than any symphony, the soft padding of Leo's paws on the polished floor, and then I felt his familiar, wet nose nudge my hand. I let out a choked sob of relief and wrapped my arms around his neck, burying my face in his thick, golden fur. He smelled of sunshine and fresh air, a scent that instantly calmed my frayed nerves. He licked away the tears on my cheeks, his gentle presence a balm to my wounded spirit. With Leo by my side, a sense of calm settled over me. His steady breathing was a comforting rhythm, a reminder that I was not alone. I held his leash in one hand, his warmth and strength flowing into me. The trial resumed. Mr. Henderson's lawyer looked annoyed, but he continued his questioning, albeit with a little less venom in his voice. I answered his questions with a newfound clarity, my voice steadier now. Leo sat at my feet, a silent, watchful guardian. Then, Miss Davies had an idea. She asked the judge if I could approach the defendant's table. The judge, looking intrigued, agreed. With Leo leading the way, I walked slowly towards Mr. Henderson. As we got closer, Leo, who had been calm and composed until now, suddenly tensed. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound I had only heard a handful of times, usually when he sensed a threat. "What's wrong, Leo?" I whispered, my hand tightening on his harness. He pulled me forward, his nose twitching, sniffing the air around. "Mr. Henderson." I could hear Mr. Henderson's sharp intake of breath. He was nervous. "What is the meaning of this?" his lawyer blustered. But Ms. Davies' voice cut through his protests, sharp and clear. "Your Honor, I believe the dog has sensed something." Leo's growl grew louder, more insistent. He was focused on something on the table in front of Mr. Henderson, his briefcase. Leo nudged it with his nose, then looked up at me, a soft whine escaping his lips. He was trying to tell me something. "The briefcase," I said, my voice trembling with a dawning realization. "It's the briefcase." The judge looked at Ms. Davies, a curious expression on his face. "Counsel." "Your Honor," Ms. Davies said, her voice ringing with confidence, "I request permission to have the defendant's briefcase opened." Mr. Henderson's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection. This is outrageous. A fishing expedition based on a dog's growl." But the judge overruled him. "Given the unusual circumstances, I will allow it. Open the briefcase, Mr. Henderson." A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. I could hear the click of the latches as Mr. Henderson, his hands trembling, opened his briefcase. For a moment, there was nothing but the rustling of papers, and then a gasp rippled through the courtroom. The bailiff's voice was filled with disbelief. "Your Honor, there's a wooden box in here." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't need to see it. I knew what it was. I could almost hear the faint, ghostly melody of Claire de Lune. Miss Davies' voice was triumphant. "Your Honor, I believe we have found the truth." The courtroom erupted in a flurry of hushed whispers. I stood there, my hand resting on Leo's head, my heart overflowing with a mix of emotions: relief, vindication, and an overwhelming love for the magnificent creature. By my side, he had done what no one else could. He had seen the truth in a way that no one with sight ever could. The rest of the trial was a blur, Mr. Henderson confessed. His smooth baritone, now a broken, defeated mumble. The judge declared a mistrial for my case and ordered a new trial for Mr. Henderson, this time with him as the defendant in a case of theft. As Ms. Davies and I left the courtroom, a crowd of reporters swarmed around us, their cameras flashing, their questions a barrage of noise. But I didn't feel overwhelmed this time. With Leo by my side, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. He was my hero, my protector, my furry four-legged angel. That evening, back in the quiet comfort of my own home, I sat on the floor, the recovered music box in my lap. I ran my fingers over the intricate carvings, the smooth, cool wood, a familiar comfort. With a gentle click, I opened it, and the soft, tinkling notes of Claire de Lune filled the room. Tears streamed down my face again, but this time, they were tears of joy, of gratitude. Leo rested his head in my lap, his big brown eyes, which I couldn't see but could feel, looking up at me with unwavering love and loyalty. I wrapped my arms around him, my heart full to bursting. "You saved me, Leo," I whispered into his soft fur. "You saw the truth when no one else would." He responded with a happy sigh, his tail thumping against the floor in a steady, reassuring rhythm. In the silence of my darkened world, his presence was a brilliant, shining light. He was more than just a guide dog. He was my family, my confidant, and the bravest soul I had ever known. And in that moment, I knew with a certainty that reached into the very depths of my being, that true sight has nothing to do with the eyes, it has everything to do with the heart. And my heart, thanks to Leo, was finally, completely, and incandescently full.